check these every time. So now for the next one, I need, well, if I take the first and last term, there is no x term, so I need to get 100. And in this case, I need to get 0 down there. So that means, because this sign is negative, that means I need one positive and one negative on each side. So one of these guys is going to be a positive value. So one of them is going to be positive, one of them is going to be negative, and I have to come up with the factors of 100 that can do that. Well, we could do 1 times 100, 2 times 50, 4 times 25, or 10 times 10. Well, which one of those, if one's positive, one's negative, will get that for me? That would be this 10 times 10. So my solution to this problem is going to be x minus 10 times x plus 10. And if I do an x box on that, I can check that out and see that it works. Again, factor, and I would do this for all of these guys until you really feel really comfortable with this. And so that would mean I get x squared there, I get negative 10x, positive 10x, and in the bottom corner here I get negative 100. And you can see if I combine my terms, the middle terms will drop out, which will give me that. So then again, this time I multiply the first and last term together, I get 12, and I need it to be positive 1. And since this is a negative, then I'm going to carry the negative 12 with me, and that means one's positive, one is negative, just like before. And so up here I'm going to factor 12, negative 12. And if I say, well, that's either negative 3 times 4 or negative 4 times 3, which one of those guys will get me a positive? And there's other ones. I mean, there's negative 2 times 6, there's negative 6 times 2, and there is negative 1 times 12, and 12 times negative 1. All of those are factors of 12, but you can see that the negative 3 and the 4, when combined together, will get me positive x. So I'm going to use negative 3 and positive 4, and so now when I set up my factors, it's going to be x minus 3 times x plus 4. So if I set up the x box, check it again, we should get the same thing. And so I've got x minus 3, x plus 4, and so x times x is x squared. Remember, this is a 3 up here. It's not a 5. It looks like a 5. And so then x times negative 3 would be negative 3x. 4 times x would be 4x. And then last but not least, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And you see, if I combine my like terms, the red ones again, I'll end up with positive 1x in the middle, and everything else will remain the same. So I know I did that correctly. So now what happens if we end up with a number out front, if a is not equal to 1? Well, there's a couple ways you can go about this, but I'm going to show you a process, and this is where people get confused. And we'll talk more about this in class when we get to the practice day of this. But basically what ends up happening is this. Same thing as before, I'm going to multiply the 3 and the 2 together, which will give me negative 6. So I took the a and the c. Let me erase this, let me write this out a little bit better. So first thing you do, number 1, just like before, a times c. And in this case, gave me negative 6. Okay? Now I need to, step 2, factor negative 6. Factor a times c. So I'm going to factor negative 6. And I need it to become positive 5. So I'm going to work with this. I'm going to say, okay, I've got negative 1 times 6. I've got 6 times negative 1. That's supposed to be a 6. If I can do 2 times negative 3, or I can do negative 3 times 2. Well, if I factor a and c, I want it to become positive 5. Well, that would have been the first one that I had up here, because negative 1 and positive 6 will always get me positive 5. So now what I do is step 3, rewrite the middle term. Step 3, rewrite the middle term. The middle term. B. Rewrite b, which in this case was 5x. Okay, I'm going to rewrite it in the problem. So I'm going to start out 3x squared doesn't change. my middle term now changes to negative x and positive 6x. So hopefully you see with the red that I didn't change the middle term, I just separated it out to its factors. Step 4, group. Group the first two. Group first two. Group the first two, group the last two. So we're going to group them. So I'm going to rewrite this. We have 3x squared minus x plus 6x minus 2. And you may be asking yourself, does it matter what order I put these guys in, the middle terms? No, it doesn't. It won't matter. So the grouping, I'm going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. So now I'm looking for, step 5 is what is the greatest common factor. Greatest common factor in each one of these. So in this one, you'll notice I have an x in common, so I factor out an x. I'm left with 3x minus 1. We talked about that one earlier. In the next one, greatest common factor looks like it is 2. So I take out a positive 2, and then I get 3x minus 1. So at this point, you've done it correctly because we notice we have the same terms, 3x minus 1 and 3x minus 1 inside the parentheses. So what the final answer is going to be, the stuff on the outside gets one set of parentheses, x plus 2, and the other set of parentheses is just one of the guys that are the same. And so there's my final answer, and you can do the X box to check it. You can do the area model to check that I did that correctly. So then we're going to do it. We'll do it one more time. And so this time, if I multiply the first and last term together, this time I get negative 6 again. But then I factor negative 6 following my step 2. And this time I need negative 1. So I'm going to go negative 1 times 6, or negative 6 times 1. Those don't work. Or I can do negative 2 times 3, or negative 3 times 2. Well, you'll notice that this last one is the one I want, because I want a negative 1. So I'm now going to rewrite, step 3, I'm going to rewrite the negative x as expanded out. So I'm going to say 6x squared. Now my middle term gets expanded to negative 3x plus 2x minus 1. And then now I'm going to group. Step 4 is group. So we get 6x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 1. I'm going to group them. And now I pull out the greatest common factors. Greatest common factor of the first one looks like it is 3x. And so I get 2x minus 1 for the first term. And you'll notice in the second one, I don't have anything in common, but I always have to factor something out. So I factor out a positive 1, because then I get 2x minus 1, because now my two sets of parentheses match. And so my final answer is going to be the stuff on the outside, which is 3x plus 1, times the stuff on the inside, 2x minus 1, and I factored that correctly. Alright, so moving along. So there we go, we're on our out. So define a factor again. Factors are things that multiply together, and if I want to factor this guy, I'm first going to pull out my greatest common factor, which is 2, which gives me x squared minus 121. And then this is, I can just do an x for this, because now I don't have a leading number. I have a 1 in front. So I want 121, and I want 0 for the bottom term. So I need a negative and a positive term in there, and I know that it has to be 11 times 11. So the factoring of this is x minus 11, x plus 11, and you can use the area model to multiply those together. And so I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. I will see you guys soon. Thank you.